Good morning, Maria. And this morning, I have Mark Labhart here, but then I also have another guest, Bryan. How do you say your last name?
Pohl.
Pohl. P-O-H-L, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we're here talking about several things. We wanted to start with Manzanita, right?
Yep.
Poor people up there.
If that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank KTIL and particularly Shayna. When the event hit, that Friday morning at 8 o'clock, are we on?
It is down. Oh, bring him down?
Oh, I'm just talking too loud.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So at Manzanita, when the event hit at 8 o'clock, we got right on the air with Shayna and others to talk about what the current situation is at that point in time, what we knew. I can't thank KTIL enough because you guys just immediately, because the public wants to know what's going on,
Sure.
Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people turn to the radio. So we were able to get that out because we had, I forget how many, like 8 tornado warnings that morning.
10.
Was there 10? Okay. So people are going, what do I do? How do I, and so we were able to get on the radio right away and start talking to people about what we knew at the current situation. So I want to particularly thank Shayna for that. So the Manzanita event, and I hate to say this, but it's true, but if there's any place to have a disaster, it's Manzanita. They are one of the most prepared communities you can ever think of for natural disasters. Linda Kolswalski and the Halem Valley Volunteer Corps, they have been prepared for years, and they're the poster child for how to prepare for disasters. And so they kicked their engine in place. Everything happened. Thank goodness nobody was hurt. What was interesting was it came ashore right at the bus stop for the kids in Manzanita. And it was
But there was no school.
In service day.
I know. Yeah. I know. That was very it was very fortunate that none of the kids were in school. I don't know about Nestucca, but I know Tillamook and Neocani had a in-service day.
So that was really lucky. And then I was talking to Perry Sherbaugh. He took me on a tour on Saturday, and it turned out that it actually came ashore at a fairly high elevation, and then just as it hit the beach, it dropped down and then came across Lanita, which is the main drag in Manzanita, and then kind of went in a northeasterly direction and went up. And then as soon as it got to 101, it did some damage there on the trees on 101 and then died out. So it was a fairly short event, but it went right through. It was
powerful, though. It
went right through the middle of town. And you've probably seen all the pictures and stuff.
Yes.
But nobody was hurt, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
So now we're done with the response. Now the recovery's happening. And so a lot of questions about debris, where the place of debris, insurance, is there any federal or state assistance that's coming in? I got a call from Governor Brown, Senator Wyden, Senator Merkley offering offers of assistance. So we're working with their offices right now. And then Vicki Walker from USDA Rural Development to talk about how we can get them some potential money for the public services. Most insurance coverage covers wind damage.
Yeah.
And so most people are going to have that. It will not be a FEMA disaster because it doesn't meet the FEMA floor cost, which is millions of dollars of damage.
Gotcha.
And so it probably won't beat that. So thanks to the community of Manzanita for stepping up to the plate for their emergency response. It was outstanding. Nobody was hurt, and they just did an outstanding job. So
yeah, and I mentioned before we went on the air, there's a Facebook page, Manzanita Tornado Relief, that also has a where you can send donations to. So if you can't get up there to help with some of the cleanup and recovery, you can still donate. You can also send donations to the Fulcrum Community Resources, which is in Manzanita, or you can donate online at careinc.org. So yeah, we can help out as much as we can.
Okay, thanks. And so now I asked Bryan Pohl, our Community Development Director, to come in today to talk about this FEMA biological opinion. It has the potential of being pretty serious for Tillamook County. So people have read a little bit about it in the paper maybe, but if you're a homeowner in Tillamook County and you live anywhere near a river or a stream, you might want to listen to this conversation. So, Bryan?
Take it away, Bryan.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad to be on the radio where nobody can shoot the message. It's kind of nice. Well, I guess, this is one of those things. It's not an issue. It's the issue right now. I'm going to give a little background on this, I guess. I'm just going to shoot from the hip on this one. So basically, what has happened is that a number of environmental groups have, on behalf of the National Marine Fisheries Services, or NIMFs as we call them,
I love all the acronyms.
Yeah, NIMS, NOAA, all that stuff, has sued FEMA, basically alleging that actions taken in the floodplain have been detrimental to salmon habitat for endangered species. And that lawsuit first happened in Washington, I believe. I have notes, but I can't find it right now. But
It's
I
always
believe
when you're under pressure.
yeah, I want to say it was 2004 when all this first started in Washington. They won the lawsuit in Washington in 2004 and entered into what's called a biological opinion, which is kind of a consultation between National Marine Fisheries Services and FEMA that basically does a programmatic evaluation of what's happening in the floodplain and, you know, how these things could be, the impacts could be mitigated. And that results in what's called the reasonable and prudent alternatives, which is kind of a subset of a biological opinion that says, you know, based upon the findings, you know, here's ways that you can change this program to not impact. So that happened in Washington, and it's been going on for a while.
Yeah, you said 2004-ish.
Yeah.
So, 12 years.
So the lawsuit in Oregon was filed in 2010.
Okay.
A number of the same groups, Audubon Society and everything, suing on behalf of NIMS in Oregon. And
Tell me again what NIMS stands for.
National Marine Fisheries Services.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I don't know how often you see federal agencies suing each other. I have no idea if that's normal or not. In my little worldview, that's the first time I've seen it. So basically, you know, when this happened, because FEMA had already lost this lawsuit in Washington, FEMA decided to enter into a settlement agreement with NIMS.
Because they kind of don't have a leg to stand on. If
Not
already
really.
had
There's
a
all that
ruling.
case law stuff and everything, you know. So they entered into this agreement, and they entered into a Section 7 consultation, which is where two federal agencies consult and kind of go through their programmatic sort of indicators of what this program and how it affects the endangered species. And so just this past spring, the biological opinion for Oregon came out. And again, just like the one in Washington, there's a section in there called the reasonable and prudent alternatives. And I'm on radio, so you can't see me making air quotes with reasonable and prudent. But and I understand that certainly it depends on who you are and where you are.
Right.
But your opinion on this sort of thing. But with the number of floodplains and the amount of land we have in Tillamook County in the floodplain, this has the potential to be, I'll just say, a really big deal. So a couple questions I've gotten. First of all, can
well, let's hold on. Let's talk about what it means. What does that mean for? Because I know Mark's been in here several times and we've talked about it. Kind of mentioned it and said, okay.
Yeah, so the reasonable and prudent alternatives are designed to, over the next, I believe, 10 to 12 years, basically change the entire face of floodplain management and do that in a way that protects endangered species habitat. I think there are 6 species that we're talking about here of different kinds of salmon. I can't name those offhand. But anyway.
Well, you're fired. No.
So, yeah.
How dare you come unprepared to the radio?
Yeah. So basically over the next 10 to 12 years, we're going to see a huge change in floodplain management. We don't know exactly how that's going to look. That's the first thing I want to get out there is in the RPA, reasonable and prudent alternatives, that is not our directive locally for what we are going to have to do. That is NIMP's directive to FEMA, and FEMA can actually choose how and what they will implement. So if you go on the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development website, you can just Google DLCD biological opinion and you'll get right to the page and you can look at the reasonable and prudent alternatives. If you look at that, I would not take that as exactly what's going to happen. There's a lot of sort of translation that's going to happen from here. So the main thing that you're looking at is that this whole thing is kind of laid out along 6 elements. And we're really talking about the first 2 elements that will be the immediate impact. Element 1, we've already received notice from FEMA. That's really all element 1 was notice from FEMA to local communities that, hey, something's changing.
Yeah.
And we've gotten that notice. And if it was 3 pages of basically saying, hey, this is changing. Element 2 is where I really think that we really need to be looking at right now. Element 2 is called the interim measures. And it's basically, to use a metaphor, I guess, it's a way to, from NIMS perspective, to stop the bleeding of habitat loss. Element 2 is scheduled to be implemented by March 2018.
Okay.
That would be the expectation from NIMS. Whether FEMA actually directs local communities to implement by March 2018 or not, I don't know. There's a lot that might happen between now and then.
Yeah.
So the interim measures basically are regulatory fixes that that NIMS felt could be done right away. And I have my
The
notes on
low-hanging
this.
fruit
The
type of
low-hanging
thing.
fruit.
Hold on. Can I take a quick break before you jump into the low-hanging fruit?
Sure.
Okay. We're going to talk about TBCC. Are you experienced, enthusiastic, highly skilled, and looking for a fun new career opportunity in Tillamook County? Tillamook Bay Community College is now seeking applications for a part-time library assistant. This position reports to the librarian and is responsible for assisting library patrons, providing circulation services, assisting with administration of the college tutoring program, assisting with scheduling placement tests and exams, shelving material, and assisting with library programming. Work hours are 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday. A high school diploma or higher is required, and customer service experience is preferred. The ideal candidate will be self-directed and able to work both independently and as a team. Basic computer proficiency is a must. For a full job description and to download an application, visit tillamookbaycc.edu. Don't wait. Apply today. Okay, so we're here with Mark and Bryan. Mark, Commissioner Mark Labhart, and Bryan, Director of Community Development, right?
Yep.
Yes. And so you were just getting ready to tell us what some of those interim measures of the BIOP, is that what it's called?
Very good.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So in the BIOP, under the reasonable and prudent alternatives, element 2 is kind of what I was saying is the big deal right now.
Right, because that's the one that's kind of blaring in our face.
Yeah. So cutting to the chase, the biggest part of the immediate sort of interim measures that we would be expected to implement if we are directed in this manner from FEMA is a 170-foot riparian buffer zone. Now, I would also put out there that there are some properties that can be contained completely within that 170-foot
sure.
riparian buffer zone.
So it's a buffer zone of what? Of a floodplain?
Of a floodplain, well,
Or a creek
of
or a
a
river?
creek or stream or river, and it would only be within the floodplain. So if the creek or stream does not have a mapped floodplain on the flood insurance rate maps, this doesn't apply.
And it doesn't matter. Okay.
But
But holy cow, that's a lot.
But you got to remember, where's all of our development in Tillamook County?
Yeah,
It's almost
totally. In
all
floodplains.
In the flood.
all
Right.
in the floodplain, yeah. So under this riparian buffer zone, if your property falls within that 170 feet, according to the reasonable and prudent alternatives, your uses would then be limited to water-dependent uses, habitat restoration activities that have a gain for species, and activities that do not degrade the habitat or floodplain functions in any way. You would have to hire a fish biologist to be able to put a room addition on your house. If you were within that 170 feet.
I'm just going to go out and say that doesn't seem reasonable, but go ahead.
I
I
put it
know.
in air quotes for the
Yes,
radio.
Right. Because, again, it's people that don't live here, they don't understand, they're just looking at it in a general sense, right?
A very general
Yeah,
sense.
and not really looking at it on a community-specific sense.
And there might be some options later, I think, for community-specific sort of approaches, and we can talk about that when we talk about the longer-term sort of stuff, because I think Tillamook would be very well positioned to go after something
Right.
that's a different programmatic approach. But just back to the interim measures, another thing that's being required is if you're in the 25-year flood zone, if you remove trees, you have to replace them 3-to-1. So you take out 10 trees, you got to replant 30.
What?
You have to, if you put a 100 square foot footprint room addition in your house, then you've got to find somewhere for compensatory storage on your property at 200 square feet or maybe even 300 square feet. There's 3-to-1 and 2-to-1 ratios.
Storage for what?
Flood flood habitat loss. So basically, you take up
because
100
you're
square foot
offsetting
footprint.
100 square feet, so you have to replace it with 200 square feet.
Yep.
Right, somewhere else.
Wow.
Somewhere else,
Okay.
and somewhere else on your property is
Right,
the way it
right,
reads.
right.
Again, we don't know how that directive from FEMA to us will look. If FEMA has even said a lot of these just don't even seem like they're possible to implement.
Yeah.
I look at some of this stuff, especially this, compensatory storage and everything. If you've got, a 5,000 square foot lot in the floodplain in Pacific City with a 1,000 square foot footprint house, how do you
Right.
make this
How do you
work?
even make that? Yeah, exactly.
The element two is definitely, I don't want to say it's scary enough. It's impactful enough. But if you look long term at some of this stuff beyond these first 2 years, you start to really see some of the meat of this program. Now, I'm talking to FEMA and the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development almost every day about this stuff. So I'm pretty in tune with kind of what they're thinking. They're thinking that everybody
And again,
relax.
These things that you were talking about are not things that FEMA has told us to do. It's this other organization that has told FEMA to do this.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So we don't know what FEMA is going to tell us to do. I think that these first interim measures will probably look very similar when FEMA hands those off to us. Talking with some people at FEMA just last week at a conference, even they think that they don't have the authority to do this. So
Interesting.
this is going to get really messy and
Yeah.
really hairy.
Sounds like it.
Very quickly. But I did want to talk, and I don't want to talk long term a whole lot on this, but there are elements 3 through 6 as well, and you can kind of ignore most of that because some of that is just compliance and enforcement on
Sure.
FEMA's part to local communities. The interesting thing in some of this is the mapping. Element 3 is all about mapping, and every bit of the mapping is designed to make those floodplains wider and take up a lot more room on a map.
Awesome.
So not only do you have a more restrictive overall floodplain, you've also got a larger mapped floodplain.
Yeah.
So that properties that are not in the floodplain
Now could
may
be.
regardless of the actual science behind whether they flood or not.
Right.
It's all based on probability matrices and everything, and confidence intervals, and it gets mapped to a 50% confidence interval.
And if those maps are updated, does it mean those properties that are not currently in a floodplain would then have to get flood insurance?
It could if they're carrying a federally backed mortgage policy. Yeah.
Gotcha.
One of the scariest things in there, I'm trying not to use overarching words here. One of the most impactful things in there is this idea of a 6-inch rise floodway. And I don't want to go too much into this. The floodway is basically a subset of the overall floodplain. And it's very difficult to build there. You have to get an engineering analysis in order to build there. You can hire an engineer to do a hydrologic study on your property to show that the building you're putting there is not going to impact flood flows. It's not going to cause any rise anywhere in the floodplain. And that's a pretty high bar most of the times.
Yeah.
And one of my least favorite things is to tell somebody they have to go get that because it's spendy. And sometimes it's just not possible to show that you're not going to cause a rise.
Right.
But that's a subset of the overall floodplain. And right now that is mapped to a 1 foot standard, which is basically, the overall floodplain is meant for development. It's reserved for development. And then the area called the floodway is actually reserved to convey the waters.
Right.
What this biological opinion has asked for is that now be a 6-inch rise floodway and that no development at all be allowed in the
Happens in
floodway.
it.
So you're talking about not just no development at all in the floodway. And I would point to a lot of Pacific City, and I'd be happy to show anybody the maps who wants to look at. A lot of Pacific City is actually in the floodway.
The current buildings and structures and all that. Okay.
And if you go to this 6-inch rise floodway, intuitively, that's probably going to about double the size of the floodway. And on the back
Wait,
end
what
of that,
did you say the current height of the floodway has to be?
1 foot.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So 6-inch, it has to be wider to let more water out at one time. Okay.
I'll be happy if anybody ever wants to stop by my office to give them a demonstration of what that all means, because it's really complicated. It's all based on computer modeling, but it's not radio appropriate. So
Well, if you gotta see
your
something,
listeners will
done.
fall asleep. But the gist of it is that basically that those floodways would probably double in size in a lot of cases.
Sure.
And then also not have any development at all allowed in them.
Would that mean that, and again, we don't want to fearmonger or be scary, but would that mean that structures would have to be taken out?
No,
okay.
That would not mean that.
It just means additions wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some ways to do it, but you would have to enter into consultation with National Marine Fisheries Services as a homeowner. So enjoy that.
Yeah, that sounds
fun. So that, and I've been saying for a long time, like the devil's in the details, and this is one of those things that, nobody's really talking about, this floodway thing, but it's a huge, huge issue. Even down to being able to fill, to grade, everything like that. I mean, looking at some of the farms, north of Tillamook, and there's going to be a huge floodway through there. It's going to have an impact. You want to add a milking parlor. You want to do some grading. I mean, any of that stuff. It's all fair game for this thing to prevent you from doing it. So I think if I were to pick something in there that I say is probably the most important thing to be aware of is that 6-inch rise floodway. And again, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that.
You were going to say, I interrupted you earlier. You said you had some questions, like frequently asked questions maybe that people were going over. But can I take a quick break about Pioneer Museum and then we can talk about that when we come back? Okay. Tillamook County, it's a beautiful part of the world with a rich history, and thanks to the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum, from the beauty of our shores to the preserved wonders of our past, our history is secure. Established in the 1930s, the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum was given the task of preserving and interpreting the environmental and human history of Tillamook County, and what a wonderful job they're doing. The care they give the exhibits, you'll find a restored Victoria bedroom on the second floor of the museum, to the heart they show our environment. Kilch's Point, a special place on Tillamook Bay with acres of forested wetlands, tidal marsh, and open meadow. It is Tillamook. These acres are held in trust by the museum, protected for us all. The history of Tillamook County serves as a reminder of the diverse people who have called it home. The stretch of the North Oregon coast is a living memorial to those who came before, and that history is preserved for all to enjoy at the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum. Open Tuesday through Sunday on 2nd and Pacific in downtown Tillamook. Step back in time with the Tillamook County Pioneer Museum. So we're here talking to Commissioner Labhart and Director of Community Development, Bryan Pohl, and we were just talking about the FEMA BIOP, which is what does that stand for?
Biological opinion.
Yes, thank you. I knew that I was thinking biological, but what was the other part? And how that could affect Tillamook County. And so we were just going to talk about some frequently asked questions that you
those are available. So if you just call the Community Development Office at 842...
3408, yeah.
3408, and we can get those to you. But
okay.
I'd like to just add, so some people would say, well, why don't we just tell FEMA to forget it? We're not going to do this. You can't really do that because the National Flood Insurance Program, most people that have National Flood Insurance, it's on their mortgage on their house.
Right.
And so you have to have flood insurance in order to get the mortgage through the federal. So it's going to be you just can't get out of it. And so also when we have a disaster here and we get FEMA money to repair the disasters, if you don't have a national flood insurance program, you can't get that.
Right.
So we can't just tell them no. So the next option is potentially the state of Oregon would sue the feds and say, we just can't do this. And so that's an option for us. The governor's written a letter to both FEMA and NIMS expressing strong concerns. Wyden and Merkley are also involved. So the reason I wanted Bryan to talk about this is it's a big deal. It's pretty serious. We're on top of it. We're staying tuned. We're very aggressive in probably the most aggressive county in getting ahead of this because it impacts Tillamook County significantly.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're going to stay on top of it. So if people have questions, they can call Community Development. We've got a list of frequently asked questions we can provide to them.
And they can also look at your flood pathways presentation, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to
come
share
in
with
for
anybody.
a little light conversation about some flood pathways.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
I don't think I have anything else. I did want to just cover one thing that, we may have some alternative measures of compliance in the future. Projects like the Southern Flow Corridor and things like that are habitat restoration, flood mitigation sorts of projects may actually buy us quite a bit of credit with this whole program. And so there's some questions around whether or not we'll be able to have a sort of programmatic approach based upon work that's already being done in Tillamook County. And from early conversations with FEMA and the state, that does seem very possible. So we may not have to go down some of these paths, but stay tuned on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be updates in like the newspaper and online and things like that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We have about 5 minutes left. Did you want to try to cram in as much as you can?
Sure. Just wanted to mention a couple things. The fair had their volunteer recognition dinner Monday night. That was a really cool thing. The fair was, again, a big success this year. Can't do it without volunteers. Fair board wanted to recognize the volunteers. And I would like to just publicly recognize all the volunteers. There's literally hundreds of people that work at the Tillamook County Fair just for volunteering. And
they don't get paid.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without. So I wanted to just thank the volunteers for all their efforts. Bryan just mentioned the Southern Flow Corridor. That's that flood reduction project that's kind of going, you really can't see it, but it's west of town. If you go to the hospital and you look to the north, you can see it. If you drive north on 101 and go down Goodspeed Road, you can see a lot of big trucks down there. So it's a big flood reduction project and a wetland restoration project. We're going to have the ribbon cutting on December 2nd for that. Transit lodging tax. We have decided, the Board of Commissioners have decided that we've got this, part of the money goes to what we call facilities grants. And most of those have been small projects like putting in a bathroom here or fixing up, putting a tent in Rockaway Beach or doing some work in Pacific City. So we want to look at doing some large-scale projects throughout the county. And so we've contracted with the Futures Council right now to do a survey of county residents. There's going to be 4 meetings starting in November 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th in 4 sections of the county to ask citizens, if you have, where should we be spending transit lodging tax on big projects like convention centers, big facilities, those kinds of things. And so stay tuned for that. You'll see it in the paper. We'll also probably announce it on the radio too. But we'd like to have the public's input on if you were king of the world or queen of the world and you had millions of dollars, how would you spend that on big projects? So we're trying to get a list of those kind of strategically throughout the county for how to spend the transit lodging tax dollars. We want to hear from the public on how to do that.
That was the 14th through the 17th?
14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th. I think it starts in Manzanita on the 14th and works our way south. Last meeting's in Pacific City on the 17th. Also want to mention that Ray Sealer, the PUD director, manager, is going to be retiring, and on November 18th at 3 p.m. at the Port of Tillamook Bay is going to be his going away party. So people are interested in that.
And then yours.
Mine's going to be on December 2nd at 3 p.m. at the college. So, and then last but not least, I'd like to just talk to people about voting. I just talked to Tassie before I came over this morning. Tassie O'Neill is our county clerk. The ballots were mailed out yesterday, so you'll be seeing them in your mailbox in the next few days. So people have fought and died in this country for our rights, and one of our rights is the right to vote. And so,
Oregon could not make it any easier.
I mean, we make
For
it,
real.
Lisa, we make it so easy. We
you don't
deliver
even have
it
to leave your house.
We deliver it to your house. You
Yeah.
can let it sit there for as long as you want.
And
You
you
can
stick it back in the mail.
Yeah, or you can
Or
take
just drop it off.
You can drop it off at drop boxes or bring it back to the county. You can sit in your lounge chair and take all the time you want to
Right.
fill it out. There's no pressure. So please vote. If you don't like the way things are, you have a say in that with the way you vote. So please take the time to vote. It's really important for folks out there to take the time. We've got federal elections, state elections, local elections, all the way down to city councils.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things on the ballot that they'll see coming out this year. And so please take the time to vote. It's really important. So.
And the voters pamphlet came out, I want to say last week or
Yeah, it
the
did.
week before. Yeah.
And there's a lot in that too. So.
Yeah, a lot of good information in there.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Well, look at that. See?
10
And
o'clock.
just like that, we're done. Let's see. Tomorrow, the Tillamook Regional Medical Center will be here. As always, don't forget there's construction downtown. So I know they're putting in some new lights now, and those are going to be turned on, temporary signals. So just try to slow down and be aware of what's going on around you. Senior meals, noon every weekday at the Kiowana Community Center, Pacific City. Cost is $3 for seniors and $6.75 for everyone else. Today at 10:20, so in like 20 minutes, is the Great Oregon Shakeout. Join millions of folks worldwide as they practice earthquake, drop, cover, and hold-on drills. You can get more info at shakeout.org. On Friday, join the Garibaldi Museum and Seaside Brewery for an evening of beer tasting and a fundraising raffle. 4 to 7 in the Garibaldi Museum Community Room. You going to be there, Mark?
Well, sounds good.
There's only a $5 surcharge for the beer and food, so yeah, head on up there. Saturday, there's open mic night at 6:30 at Yo Time in downtown Tillamook. It's a community celebration of story, poetry, original songs, and other literary arts, which is organized by Art Accelerated. Saturday is also National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day, which aims to provide a safe, convenient, and responsible means of disposing prescription drugs while also educating the general public about the potential for abuse of medications. However, the Sheriff's Office wants you to know they have a year-round bin at the Sheriff's Office in the lobby for disposing of prescription medication, no questions asked. And lastly, on Saturday, a coalition of advocates, including the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon Department of Forestry, and the OSU Extension Office, will hold a free collection event for agricultural and commercial pesticides and empty containers at the Tillamook Transfer Station off of Eckloff Road in Tillamook. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming in this morning.
You're welcome.
Good
Thank you.
information. Go talk to Bryan at Community Development if you have any questions. And thank you, Tillamook, for listening.